we could use them now. One sci-fi scenario has the aliens waiting on the fringe more or less patiently to see if self-destruction happens again this time around. If we reach the singularity, things will change at any rate. In this short time bubble we enjoy, tools have arisen which may make it possible to preserve more within humanity for future generations. We don't have to think very much to see that Gurdjieff's answer to Hussein at the end of the tales concerned his big question about the solution to war. His solution of an implanted reminding factor that we're going to die is related to his assessment that we have immature second brains. That is, if we were mature, we would not need such a factor. We don't have to look very far to notice that the most well-known business leader of our times, a man who was anti-war and pro-music, gave a grandfatherly variation of the same advice. Can we point to any other highly visible person outside of the entertainment industry who has articulated Gurdjieff's solution so intentionally? We should not be surprised. Gurdjieff is a grandfather of our time, and like us, Steve Jobs is a grandchild of it. Supergraphics of the enlarging world. 1. Unfolding geometry. 2. Spiral emanation. 3. Ladder map ray of creation. 4. Typical EM spectrum. 5. Breakout. These illustrations from Keith Buzzell's books involve simple geometry to help us begin to visualize very big concepts in a simple way. They are not the whole concept, but representative of it. They have their origins with Gurdjieff as told by Ouspensky. This introduction is simplified. We begin with a triangle which can represent endlessness prior to creation. The first unfolding yields a form which can represent World 3, the Holy Sun Absolute, the abode of endlessness. And the second unfolding can represent World 6, having 6 principles or laws, and the 6 points of a rudimentary enneagram. Next is depicted the moment of creation, the Big Bang, and in subsequent material worlds, Okidanuk appears as a unifying substance throughout the entire creation. Next, from left to right vertically, is the great ray of creation in descent, correlated with the hydrogen table, the scientific terms for materials, and man's possibilities for the octavic digestion of physical food, air, and impressions. Next, at top left is a depiction of the development of the 4 forces known to physics after the Big Bang. At top center is 2 of the 6 lateral octaves possible on the symbol, unfolded to world 48, where we live, showing the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. At top right is the frequency spectrum of electromagnetic radiation, spread as a vertical ladder. Then we have a typical scientific electromagnetic spectrum chart which reminds us that the photon, light, is the carrier of electromagnetic force and that all of it is Okidanuk. Fiat lux, fiat erat lux. Here's my editorial preface to Gurdjieff's Whim by Dr. Keith Buzzell. With God on our side. Imagine there's no heaven, it's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine there's no countries, it isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine no possessions, I wonder if you can, no need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. The real God, as we sometimes call our great megalocosmos. When we take a broad historical view of mankind's conceptions of God as far as the political animations known to us as organized religions have gone, we can see that while at their origin they were focused on man's inner world and the possibilities of real transformation, they have for most epochs been inextricably bound up with war. Perhaps since the beginning of human culture, shamans, soothsayers, and priests have been embroiled in and enlisted to calm the minds of soldiers of all stripes into thinking that God is giving them an edge in their military endeavors, or at least assures them that their cause is just, right, conscientious, propitious, and so on, while in reality the primary result has been generally that a lot of people have died and someone has gotten rich. In the recent epoch, essentially our time, particularly in the West and now spreading eastward, a new force, science, has entered the food octave of religious politics. It contains digestive enzymes and carries higher hydrogens in the form of quantifiable observations and ideas concerning the great megalocosmos. For the last 100 years, Gurdjieff's ideas, among others, have been greasing the wheels of this process. Thus, our former views of God have clashed with science and have to be reconciled anew. And once they have been reconciled, it may prove difficult to organize a religion around them, or to succeed for very long in holding forth the conviction that science can be used to prove that inferior beings must be obliterated or conquered or systematized into castes. Before science was taught routinely to school children, in order to explain and model the obviously superintelligent origin of nature, man endowed his gods with features that seemed more easily comprehensible and natural, beginning with his own. Gradually, as nature has become better understood scientifically, abstractly, and predictably, lawfully, it has become increasingly difficult to explain the micro-actions of nature as individually willed by anthropomorphic higher intelligences, which can be prayed to and supplicated for exception, so much so that in our time we have seen the asymptotic merge of science and religious creation myth, the metaphorical seeds of a theory of natural law. Those who attempt to understand and reconcile God with natural science have therefore developed new creation myths more congruent with scientific observation. Gurdjieff's myth having rather advanced features, as is discussed in this book about Gurdjieff's whim. One can imagine how Gurdjieff must have reasoned to consider all known creation myths and modern science before presenting his solution in the tales. Along the way, to facilitate our understanding, he describes a higher science he calls objective science, so that he can ask us to personally take up his questions and guide us to find answers, which we can personally make our own. Many of the features of Dr. Buzzell's books have been, and are, to help us reconcile these two sciences. What is the purpose of life on Earth? What is the solution to war? Gurdjieff's questions are familiar to us. His great written 10-volume work, All and Everything, can be understood as containing metaphorical answers to the first question. Any reader of Gurdjieff's first series, The Tales, knows that he was also very concerned about the second question, which he called reciprocal destruction. Contrast that conception with his term reciprocal maintenance. And his criticism therein of our imbalanced centers, a cause of our inability to actively digest our experience, which primarily manifests as an immature second brain and a misused third brain, is foundational to answering the second question, about which he encourages us too to care. Auxiliary to these questions, his lesser-known whim, to effect a change in the very meaning of the word God, can be seen as an essential part of his solution for the cause and abolition of war. By his whim, Gurdjieff couples his fundamental questions with implicit ones, which can only be answered in the context of objective science. What is the nature of God? Is there individual life after the death of the body? And what is its relation to God? In the Tales, Gurdjieff describes two other related disablements for us to ponder: our externalization of good and evil outside ourselves, our elevation of military men as heroes. In his second series, in the essay The Material Question, Gurdjieff explores a further war-related disablement: our problem of acquiring necessary money without resorting to any means which could one day give rise to remorse of conscience. Gurdjieff warns us that the abolition of war may take a very long time and not to be overly ambitious. Beelzebub answers Hussein's question of what can be done by suggesting that there be implanted in men a new organ like Kundabuffer, whereby each of us would become consciously aware of the inevitability of our own death and the death of every one upon whom our eyes rest. Regarding like Kundabuffer, an understanding of what Gurdjieff meant by implanted might be related, on the one hand, to empathetic ideas, but on the other, to an increased sensitivity of our second brains with respect to what are called mirror neurons, so as more to fully cognize and digest the loss of people close to us due to death. Interestingly, after all this, it must be admitted that Gurdjieff's endlessness cares about us and has hope for us. In the current volume before you, Dr. Buzzell explores the reasons for and implications of Gurdjieff's whim. But wait, one more thing. This would not be a fitting discussion about Steve Jobs without one more thing. And there is just one more thing. An early close friend of Steve's, who hung out with him and traveled with him to India, worked on Apple I, II, and Macintosh. He sent me the following note on 15th of April 2012, because he had seen a notice of this program. Hi, John. I remember your name from Macworld a year or two ago. Cool to see this topic. You know, Steve was really into Gurdjieff and had a copy of Beelzebub's Tales by 1975. Also, Meetings with Remarkable Men, which I also read, and the subsequent film we watched together, and really liked it. Cheers, Daniel.